and it seems only fitting that we speak about Sarada Devi. So little is known about her, and that is part of her beauty. She is truly Mahamaya. She conceals her power and projects a simple village woman. This is Mahamaya, concealing and projecting. So who is Sarada Devi? Who is she? We have her photograph on our altar, we worship her, but who is she? Who is she really? To understand someone so profound, we have to begin on the periphery. We have to begin on the outside and work our way in. So we begin by studying the life events, not just simply by reading, but really studying these seemingly ordinary life events because they reveal the extraordinary. We start with her relationship with Sri Ramakrishna, first-hand accounts of those who knew her, and Sarada Devi's own admissions. And we try to meditate on those. Well, she was born in December 22nd, 1853, in a very poor Brahmin family in the village of Jairambati. How many of you have gone to Jairambati? Yeah, it's a beautiful little village. And now it's becoming more and more popular. People are flocking to her village from all over the world. But it still resembles the way she lived at that time. Her father, Ramchandra, was a devotee, and he was an exceptional devotee. He had many, many sterling qualities, extraordinary qualities. He wouldn't accept gifts from just anyone. He was very particular. Her mother was Shamasundari Devi, and she loved to feed people. Sarada Devi said of her parents, "How could I have been born in that family if my father and mother had not practiced religious austerities?" So there are mystical events associated with her birth, just as there were with Ramakrishna's life, Krishna's life, Ramachandra's life, Jesus' life. Shamasundari went to visit her family in Sihor, and she stopped by a bell tree on the roadside, and she heard a jingling sound and saw a little girl climbing down from the bell tree. And the little girl embraced her, and she said, "Here I come to your home." And Shamasundari fell down unconscious. In other words, she went ecstatic and lost outer consciousness. And from then on, she felt she was pregnant. Her husband Ramchandra also dreamt that a beautiful young girl embraced him and said, "I have come to your family." So these mystical events are associated in the life, in the advent of an incarnation. She was predestined to be the virgin wife, the consort of Sri Ramakrishna. Now her childhood was one of dire poverty as a child. There was a famine in 1864. And Sarada's family had very little, and what little they had, they shared with others at that time. But often they would run short. Her family farmed rice and cotton, and her father performed pujas in other homes to bring in a little bit of income. Sarada was simple. And like so many of these avatars and their consorts, she loved to make images, particularly of Kali and Lakshmi. And she helped her mother husk paddy. We know about her marriage. It took place during Sarada's childhood. And at the time, Sri Ramakrishna was practicing intense sadhana at Dakshineswar. And Dakshineswar was a 3 days journey to Jairambati. Now we can take it by car, it's a 3 hours journey by car. And we know that Ramakrishna was God intoxicated at that time and incapable of really functioning on his own. He needed a personal attendant. He was indifferent to food, clothing, and other necessities. And day and night he spent in meditation. And so the family was concerned, and they sought a bride for him, but unsuccessfully, until Sri Ramakrishna said, "Why are you fruitlessly searching? Go to Ramchandra Mukherjee's house in Jairambati, and you will find a girl there, tied as it were with a straw." So she was destined to be his divine wife. And in May 1859, they were betrothed. At that time, Sarada was 5 years old, and Sri Ramakrishna was 24 years of age. They returned to his village of Kamapakur, just a few miles from Jairambati, 4 miles from Jairambati. And for 10 days, tiny Sarada was there with Ramakrishna's family and Ramakrishna himself. Now, Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi were married for 26 years. But out of the 26 years, only 10 of those years were spent together. So think of that. In December 1860, Sri Ramakrishna visited Jairambati for a few days. Sarada was 7 years old at that time. And then he returned to Dakshineswar and plunged once again into intense sadhana. This was an extraordinary marriage. Sarada was 13 years old when she went to Kamapakur, twice, for 1 month and again for 1.5 months. That was all. So it was these short times together that added up to 10 years of the time they spent together out of their 26 years of married life. Sarada said, "I used to think, I'm a new bride. How shall I go to the pond to bathe by myself?" This was when she was 13 years old and in Kamapakur. "One day, I left the house by a back door when a young maiden suddenly appeared, apparently from nowhere. As I started for the pond, 4 maidens walked in front of me and 4 behind me. Thus, I was guarded and protected as I walked to the water, and all of us bathed together. Afterwards, they brought me home, and this continued every day during that visit to Kamapakur. I wondered who those girls were, but I could not figure it out." So she's beginning to have a glimpse of the spiritual, the divine providence connected with her birth, with her life. It's very interesting. Sri Ramakrishna returned to Kamapakur for a few months, again went 6.5 years to regain his health from practicing Tantra, Vedanta, and Islam. So he went through intense sadhana. Totapuri was his Vedanta guru. We belong to the Puri lineage of the Shankara order. Totapuri told his disciple Ramakrishna, "What does it matter if you are married? He alone is firmly established in the knowledge of Brahman, who can keep intact his renunciation, detachment, discrimination, and self-awareness, even while living with his wife." So you see how Sri Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi modeled the life not only of the monastic, but also of lay devotees. They belong to all of us, no matter what our walk of life. Sri Ramakrishna trained Sarada how to serve God, how to serve the guest, how to serve the Guru. And at that time, Sarada Devi began to worship Sri Ramakrishna as her Ishta. He taught her how to cook with the proper spices and how to never say no. It's very interesting. How to never say no. Sarada Devi herself related, One day the master was eating and asked for a little salt. I said, "There is no salt in the spice rack." Irritated, Sri Ramakrishna said, "What do you mean there is no salt? Never say the word no. Always be positive and collect the things that are necessary for the household. Always be positive." So these are advices for us to always see what we can do. Always be positive. If we have that attitude, we'll succeed in our spiritual life. That was one important teaching. He also taught her about the unsubstantial nature of the world, and thus he taught her detachment. At nighttime, they would talk about spiritual matters, and he would tell her about his own spiritual experiences. And Sarada would fall asleep. She was still just a young girl. And Sri Ramakrishna at that time gave her another very important teaching, one of the most important teachings that we must all try to aspire to. Adjust according to time, place, and circumstance. For example, when we come here, we don't just barge in and start talking. We walk in, assess the situation. If there's a worship going on, we become quiet, we silence our cell phones. We behave in a certain way. You see? To always be watchful of the environment that we're entering. Once Thich Nhat Hanh, the famous Buddhist monk, said, "I can tell about a person's state of mind by the way they open the door." You see? So if we're careless, we just throw our shoes to one side and we barge in. But if we're very mindful, we put our shoes carefully to one side so no one will trip, and we open the door quietly so as not to disturb others. Adjust according to time, place, and circumstance. And that teaching made Sarada Devi a reformer. Even in this rigid, caste-bound society at that time, she had adjusted to time, place, and circumstance. And thus, she changed society. When Sri Ramakrishna left for Calcutta, Sarada was joy-filled at that time and transformed. Her movements, her speech, her conduct, the way she worked, everything was transformed. From 1867 into 1871, Sarada lived in Jarambati. And at that time, village women gossiped about Sri Ramakrishna. They called him a madman, mad Gadai. Sarada tried to avoid these village women, but there was one woman, her name was Banu. She was a widow who lived nearby. And she said to Sarada, "Your son-in-law is Shiva himself, and Krishna too. You may not understand this now, but you will in the future. Mark my words." Banu was a rishi. She had special insight. Once in Jarambati, Banu made a garland for Sri Ramakrishna. And when Sri Ramakrishna was alone, she put the garland around his neck, and Sri Ramakrishna went into deep samadhi. Such was the woman Banu, a simple widow, a rishi. In 1872, Sarada traveled to Dakshineswar, and she fell ill with fever. And Sarada Devi later told, "I was lying almost unconscious with fever, without any sense of decorum. Just then I saw a girl come and sit down beside me. She was black in complexion. I have never seen such beauty before. She passed her hand over my head and body. It was so soft and cool that the burning sensation of my body began to subside. I asked, 'Where do you come from?' 'I come from Dakshineswar.' You'll see your husband as soon as you're better. I've been taking care of him there, for your sake. Sarada asked her, are you one of our relatives? And the woman answered, I am your sister. So the awakening of Sarada Devi's divinity took full form when she was 18 years of age. So up until this time, there were glimpses. We see it before her birth, and when she was a little child, she was earmarked for Ramakrishna, and then we see in her childhood how she began to experience visions. And then when she was 18, Sri Ramakrishna taught her meditation, prayer, samadhi, and knowledge of Brahman. Sarada Devi revealed, on moonlit nights I would look at the reflection of the moon in the placid water of the Ganges and piteously pray to God with tearful eyes, O Lord, there are stains even on the moon, but let my mind be absolutely stainless. So free from any criticism, free from any stain. She practiced this to perfection. One day Sarada Devi was massaging the master's feet, and she asked him, how do you regard me? Sri Ramakrishna said, the mother who is worshipped in the temple, and the mother who gave birth to this body, and is now living in the Nahabad, the same mother is now stroking my feet. Really and truly, I always regard you as the embodiment of the blissful mother of this universe. He saw her as Mother Kali. And she saw him as Mother Kali. And in the early worship of our order, in the worship of Ramakrishna, the Kali Bija was used in the worship as the embodiment of Mother Kali. Later the worship has been changed, but in the very, very beginning, the Kali Bija was used. So to be in the company of such a soul who looked upon her as such couldn't help but transform her and awaken her divine nature. Just imagine if we were in the presence of such a soul who regarded us as such, we would be and become that aspect of divinity. But Sarada Devi was special. She was born for that, as Sri Ramakrishna had testified. So it was when she was 18 years old that he performed the Shodashi Puja. Yeah. Now what is remarkable is that Shankara himself, after he had the vision of the Divine Mother, every day in his mat, in Kaladi, he performed the Vidya worship, the worship of the Vidya, Vidya Shakti, which is Shodashi. So Sri Ramakrishna, as part of the Shankara order, as lineage of the Shankara tradition, he performed the Shodashi worship in the living Shodashi. It was June 5th, 1872, Palaharani Kali Puja. And it took place in Sri Ramakrishna's room. All the doors were closed. And Sarada Devi sat on a rice powder painted wooden seat, and the seat is still there. I think it's in the museum now at Beramat. You can see the wooden platform that she sat on. To the right of the worshipper, and she entered into a semi-conscious mood. Sri Ramakrishna offered her 16 items. And when he fed her, she lost outer consciousness. And uttering the mantras, Sri Ramakrishna also went into samadhi. Sarada Devi later described, first he painted my feet with altar, put vermilion on my forehead, and clad me in a new cloth. He dressed her. Before that time, Holy Mother would never go into his room without wearing the veil, but he dressed her. He then fed me with sweets and a betel roll. I saw him doing all this, but had no desire to utter a word. She was in Bhava Samadhi. I was in an ecstatic state and completely oblivious to the external world. Hence, I did not exactly know how the worship proceeded. Finally, I bowed down to him mentally and returned to the Nahabad. Now this worship of his divine consort, his wife, as a Shodashi, has particular spiritual significance and world significance. He awakened his young wife's divinity. Sri Ramakrishna awakened the full-blown divinity within Mother. And their souls became one with pure consciousness. They became one. And all that that means. And completely transcended the idea of any sex consciousness whatsoever. Sri Ramakrishna saw Sarada as the Divine Mother, and he said, "She is my Shakti. She is my Shakti." And Sarada saw Sri Ramakrishna as the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. And we know this today. Those who worship Sri Ramakrishna, sometimes they have the vision of Kali, sometimes Mother Durga, sometimes Shiva, sometimes the Black Virgin of Chartres. This we know. Sri Ramakrishna is the embodiment of all gods and goddesses. Why? Because he had the experience of all gods and goddesses. So his form is the symbol of that universality. No matter who we worship, he is the emblem of all. But after that worship, Sarada Devi said, "Know that the Master and I are identical." So by worshipping Sarada Devi, we're worshipping the Master. By worshipping the Master, we're worshipping Sarada Devi as well. They are one and the same. Spiritually, what happened? Sarada Devi received the taste of divine love. Divine communion. That's what it means. Divine love. And Ramakrishna offered to Sarada Devi the fruits of his sadhana and all that that means. He offered her the fruits of everything he had attained. So those fruits were hers. She was the recipient of the highest, of any realm that Sri Ramakrishna had visited. Any divine realm, she was the repository as well. And on a global level, Ramakrishna paid the highest respect to womankind. So he is special to us. He marshaled in the awakening of the Kundalini, of the universal Kundalini, the divine Shakti in all women. He empowered Mother to teach the motherhood of God after his passing. So she's very unique, very special. And we see this today. There's a tremendous interest in the Mother Goddess. Not only within the Hindu tradition, but in the Christian tradition. A reawakening of Mother Mary. And we find connections between the Black Virgin and Mother Kali. The same roots tying back. It's a very, very interesting time for us. After the Shodashi Puja, in March 1872 to October 1873, Sarada Devi stayed at Dakshineswar, and she continued her routine of cooking, cleaning, and serving Sri Ramakrishna. In other words, her household became a spiritual arena. Suddenly, household tasks become a puja hall. They're no longer confining. It's no longer confining to be doing housework, cooking, cleaning. It's a spiritual practice. Sarada Devi said, "It is impossible to describe his spiritual moods in those states. In his God-intoxicated state, he would sometimes say words incomprehensible to me, sometimes laugh, sometimes weep, and sometimes remain motionless in samadhi, like a corpse. The whole night would pass that way. My body trembled with fear, and I eagerly awaited the break of day. At that time, I knew almost nothing about samadhi. So Sri Ramakrishna began to teach her various mantras to bring his mind down. Imagine the mantra Om to bring his mind down, certain bija mantras to bring his mind down. We use those bija mantras to bring our minds up. You see? And Sarada Devi helped him as he underwent certain sadhanas. For example, the companion of the divine. She helped him to procure the articles that he needed. And Sri Ramakrishna talked about her unique contribution to motherhood. He said, in the near future, you will have so many sons and daughters that you will be exhausted looking after them. You see? So Sarada Devi's 10 years with Sri Ramakrishna are very interesting. She traveled between Jarambati, Kamapakur, and Dakshineswar 9 times. During her 4th visit to Dakshineswar from Kamapakur, she was with a few family friends and members. They needed to cross this robber-infested field at nightfall. You all know the story. And Sarada fell behind, and the night fell. And suddenly there was a terrifying man who appeared with a staff in hand and said, "Why are you standing there? Where are you going?" And Mother didn't move. And he came closer, and suddenly his face changed and softened. "Don't be afraid," he said. "My wife is behind me. Would you please help me?" Sarada Devi said to him. "My companions have left me behind, and I've lost my way. Would you please help me to reach them? Your son-in-law is staying at the Kali temple at Dakshineswar, and I'm going to meet him. If you accompany me there, he will be very pleased." The robber's wife approached behind the robber, and Sarada Devi took her hand and said, "I am your daughter Sarada." The robbers consoled her and took her to Telobello and arranged her food and rest, and the next day they escorted her to her companions in the next village. And they wept when they departed. Sarada Devi said, "Though these people are now good and gentle, my dacoit father, my robber father, must have committed many highway robberies." So what transpired on that night in Telobello? How many people have been to Telobello? I've been. And I visited the Telobello Kali temple. She's a left-handed Kali. She's worshipped by the robbers so they can rob and kill if necessary. She's a fierce Kali. But what transpired that night? Sarada Devi's redemption. And later, the robbers disclosed to Mother, "You are not in fact an ordinary human being. We saw you then as Mother Kali." But Sarada Devi, as was her style, pretended to be indifferent. "How is that?" she said. But the robbers firmly said, "No, child, we have really seen you as Kali. You now hide that form from us because we are sinners." Mother always tried to camouflage her spiritual experience. In a sense, she was more powerful than Ramakrishna because she could control them and hide them. So what was it like to live with Ramakrishna? Once when Sri Ramakrishna and Sarada Devi were in Jaramati, Swami Subodhananda related. The master went to bed after supper. Afterwards, Holy Mother had her supper and finished the housework. When she entered the master's room, she found a blazing light shining on the bed, but the bed was empty. She stood there the entire night with folded hands. At daybreak, the master emerged from the light and bowed down to Holy Mother, saying, "You have appeared in this form. Very good." At Dakshineswar, the Nahabat where Mother stayed was very small, 50 square feet. How many of you have been to Dakshineswar? Yeah, so you've seen the Nahabat, how tiny it was. No windows. There was a plated bamboo screen around for privacy, so there was really no air to breathe. And behind the screen, Sarada Devi watched Sri Ramakrishna's kirtans, the dancing, his bhava samadhis. It was a tiny abode. It was her bedroom, her living room for guests, her shrine room, her workplace, and her storage room, all rolled into one. And what was her routine like? She arose at 3 in the morning. She took her bath in the Ganges, and she spent 1.5 hours in worship and meditation. She performed her worship every day. She cooked for Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees. And when the male disciples were absent, she carried his food tray to him before noon, and she watched over his meal, and she tried to divert his mind so that he would stay in the plane of normal consciousness, enough to eat, because often he would go into samadhi without warning. And at 1 p.m., Sarada Devi took her own lunch and then a brief rest. And then Ramakrishna in the afternoon sent her to visit neighbors in the afternoon. And she returned at Arati so no one could see her. She remained hidden. She would light her lamp, burn her incense, and sit for meditation in the evening. And then she would cook the evening meal for Ramakrishna and his mother, and then she would take her own meal, and she would retire to bed at 11. So that was her routine. Now, what was her service to Ramakrishna like? When we read her life, this is a kind of meditation. If we find it difficult to meditate, we go back and try to relive her lila. That's a wonderful meditation. Keeps the mind focused. This was her practice. She prepared betel rolls for Sri Ramakrishna and the devotees, and she was very clever. Some with cardamom and spices, and others with only lime and betel. Yoginma asked, "Won't you add cardamom to all?" And Sarada Devi said, "Yogin, the good ones are for the devotees. I have to make them my own by taking special care of them. And these ordinary ones are for the master. He is already my own." She cooked for 50 to 60 devotees on Sri Ramakrishna's birthday. And she took care of all who came to Dakshineswar to visit him. And all of this food came out of the Nahabat. We saw so much food here. It came out of the little Nahabat in the kitchen. So much food. We all worked together so quietly and so well. As a beautiful example of Karma Yoga. Beautiful example. But Sri Ramakrishna was concerned that Mother was working so much. So he said to Latu Maharaj, Swami Adbhutananda, who was his servant, "The one on whom you are meditating is here now cooking and cleaning the dishes in the Nahabat. Do you know that?" And to Sarada Devi he said, "This boy will help you with the housework." And so he began to stay with Mother and help her with the cooking and the cleaning and so forth. He washed the dishes, he prepared spices, he kneaded the dough, and other chores he performed. These were golden years for Sarada Devi. She said about those years, Sri Ramakrishna had established the picture of bliss within my very heart, and I became full of that bliss. It didn't matter to her that her room was tiny, that there was no ventilation, that so many guests were sleeping practically on top of her, that she was laboring night and day. She was in Bhava Samadhi. Her attitude toward Ramakrishna, when she was asked, this is wonderful advice. In spiritual matters, absolute obedience. In other things, I used my own common sense. She was a real woman. And within her, we see the awakening of motherhood. She made it her job to feed all the disciples of Ramakrishna. Now, Ramakrishna himself was very watchful of the disciples' food. And he told Sarada Devi how many chapatis to prepare for each of them. Rakal was to have 6, Latu 5, Baburam 4. But Sarada Devi gave 6 chapatis to Baburam. And Sri Ramakrishna complained. He told her that she might be hindering his spiritual growth. And she said, "Why are you so worried because he has 2 extra chapatis? I shall look after his future. Please don't make an issue about his food." Yeah. She was a woman in her own right. See, she stood up to her husband, but she was absolutely obedient in spiritual matters. About spiritual initiation, it's very interesting. Once Sri Ramakrishna sent Trigunatita to Sarada Devi for spiritual instructions, and he quoted a Bengali couplet, "Radha's infinite power of Maya is beyond description. Millions of Krishnas and Ramas evolve, abide, and dissolve in it." So by sending Trigunatita to Sarada Devi for spiritual instruction and reciting this couplet, he was saying that she was equal to Radha. Trigunatita was initiated by Sri Ramakrishna, but Sarada Devi also gave him formal initiation. Yeah. It's very interesting. Sarada Devi was a giver of boons. Kalipada Ghosh was an alcoholic, and he spent the family's money on drink. Finally, the wife went to Sri Ramakrishna for medicine to cure her husband, and Ramakrishna sent her to Sarada Devi. He said, "She knows all those things." Sarada Devi was conducting the worship at the time, and she sent her back to Ramakrishna. "He knows everything," she said. And so this exchange went on 3 times. And finally, Sarada Devi wrote Sri Ramakrishna on an offered bell leaf, the name of Ramakrishna on an offered bell leaf, and gave it to Kalipada's wife. She said, "Save this in an amulet, then chant the Lord's name and your wish will be fulfilled." After 12 years, Kalipada Ghosh came to Sri Ramakrishna transformed, became a great devotee of Ramakrishna. Now the contemplative and the active life coexisted in Sarada Devi. She's a wonderful example to men and women who have household jobs, who have outside jobs, who have children. She had all of this. She had how many children? She had so many children. And how hard she worked, and yet she was a contemplative. Early in the morning, she was absorbed in samadhi. She said, "At Dakshineswar, I used to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and sit in meditation. Often I totally forgot my body and the world. Those were unforgettable days." Many times, the more intense our schedule is, the more wisely we husband our time, the more concentrated we work, and the more concentrated our meditation is. We know we only have this amount of time, and so we force the mind to concentrate. Sarada Devi told her niece, Nalini, "When I was your age and worked very hard, and in spite of that, I used to repeat the mantra 100,000 times every day. That's absolutely inconceivable. Except when one practices the mantra, it begins to flash so rapidly. It's no longer simply lip service. It begins to just flash rapidly." How was Sarada Devi initiated by Sri Ramakrishna? He wrote a mantra on her tongue. And he asked her to surrender her previous mantra she had received from her family, guru, to her chosen ideal. And he also taught her mantras for the different gods and goddesses. And he transmitted his spiritual experiences to her so she could conduct her spiritual ministry. So that is the history. Later, Sarada Devi said, "The mantras I give were taught to me by Sri Ramakrishna. And these are the Siddha mantras. They're very powerful. There are 8 of them. Very, very powerful mantras." Sri Ramakrishna said to her, "You have heard Narayan's song, 'Thou art my all in all, O Lord.' Please meditate on that song for a few days. Thou art my all in all." Sarada Devi would forget time and space in meditation, but she told her family members she desired ecstasies like Gauri-Ma. You know, Gauri-Ma was a very manly woman disciple of Ramakrishna. She was very independent. But when Sri Ramakrishna found out, he said, "Why does she wish to have ecstasies? Gauri is a girl with a masculine nature. She can withstand public criticism. It is good for Sarada Devi to suppress spiritual emotions." And he quoted a proverb, "A female with a calm and sweet nature develops strength and attains success." So by self-control, we develop spiritual strength. So he did not encourage our displays of spiritual feelings in Sarada Devi or in any of his disciples. Swami Vivekananda was very, very hard on the devotees and his brother monks when they displayed any outer manifestation of spiritual experience. But later Yogin said, Yogin Ma, mother's attendant, "One day when I went to the Nahabad, I found that the mother was performing her daily worship. As I opened the door, I noticed that she was laughing ecstatically, and she then began to cry profusely. Tears streamed from her eyes. This continued for a while. Then she became still and went into samadhi. I shut the door and came away." She had ecstasies. But she kept them hidden. Sri Ramakrishna finally, when he was near the end of his life, he left Dakshineswar as he became ill. Sri Ramakrishna revealed Sarada Devi's power at that time. At Shayampakur, Sarada Devi remained. When he was at Shayampakur, she remained at Dakshineswar, very, very anxious about Ramakrishna. And Golapma, who was another attendant of Mother, and she was very outspoken. The only one who could exceed her was Narayan. He would put her in her place. The Golap said to Yogan, Yogan, it seems that the master is annoyed with mother, so he is going to Calcutta. And Sarada wept when she heard this. And she rode to Srinampur to see Sri Ramakrishna and asked him, is it true you are angry with me? And Sri Ramakrishna said, no, not at all. Who told you? And Sarada said, Golap. And Ramakrishna said, she made you cry with this falsehood? Does she not know who you are? Let her come. And when Golap came to Sri Ramakrishna, he said, why did you make her cry with such a baseless story? Don't you know who she is? Go to her right now and then ask for her forgiveness. Golap walked on foot to Dakshineswar and she fell at Sarada Devi's feet and begged forgiveness. Sarada Devi laughed and patted Golap on her back and she said, oh dear Golap. Sarada Devi adjusted to time, place, and circumstance. We see this, and especially it became manifest at that time when Ramakrishna was ill. All of his male disciples were in the house with Ramakrishna, and they all wondered how Sarada Devi would manage. But Sri Ramakrishna needed a cook, someone whose food he could eat, and that was Sarada Devi. So she went to serve him. And how she managed her bathroom activities, how she cooked and performed her spiritual practices, but remained hidden from view, that's a story in itself. What were Sarada Devi's realizations of the Master? Sarada Devi herself said, once I saw Mother Kali with her head tilted to one side. I asked why she stood that way, and she replied, because of his throat trouble, I too am ill. And after Sri Ramakrishna's death, Sarada Devi cried out, O Mother Kali, what have I done that you have departed, leaving me alone in the world? She looked on her husband as Mother Kali. She saw that, Mother Kali, him as Mother Kali. And Sri Ramakrishna empowered Sarada Devi before his passing. He said, those who come and take refuge in you, I will come to them during their last moments. I will hold their hands and accompany them. So everyone that she initiated, anyone who has Sarada Devi as their Ishta, Sri Ramakrishna will also come. Several days before his passing, he gave her the 8 Siddhi mantras for attaining illumination. And he said, please teach these mantras to those who come to you for initiation. Those who receive one of these mantras will have the vision of their chosen ideal during their lifetime, or at least at the time of death. And so these 8 Siddhi mantras have been passed down to each successive president of the order and to each initiating guru of the Ramakrishna mission. Those who receive one of these mantras, he said, will have the vision of their chosen ideal during their lifetime, or at least at the time of death. So powerful are these Siddhi mantras. Sarada Devi had many manifestations of the divine. After Sri Ramakrishna's passing, in August 15th, 1886, she experienced intense grief after the Master's passing. She removed her jewelry, and suddenly Sri Ramakrishna appeared and took her hand and said, am I dead that you act like a widow? I have just moved from one room to another. But Mother's grief was such that she went on pilgrimage. And this is a lesson for us all. When we experience grief of a loved one, a spouse, a child, a dear friend, a mother, a father, a brother, a sister. Study Mother's life and see how that grief is channeled into yearning for God. Use that grief as a spiritual current to move you forward. She went to Varanasi, so intense was her grief, with Yogananda, Adbhutananda, and Abhedananda. In Varanasi, she attended Arati and experienced deep ecstasy. She was hardly conscious. And only with great difficulty was she able to return to her quarters. And later she said, it was the Master who brought me home, holding me by the hand. She missed him so much. She longed for his vision. In Vrindavan, Sarada Devi became absorbed in deep samadhi many times. Yogin said, during such periods of ecstasy, her manner of speech, her voice, her way of taking food, her way of walking, and her general behavior were exactly like those of the Master. We have heard that in deep meditation, the worshipper and the worshipped become one. The scriptures mention a spiritual state known as Tadatmya Bhava, being at one with God. We have read in the Bhagavata how the gopis, unable to bear separation from Krishna, became so deeply absorbed in the thought of him that for the moment they forgot their own individualities and behaved as though they were Krishna. In the same manner, Holy Mother too forgot her own separate existence. This is the secret behind the Ras Lila. This experience of the beloved is the experience of absolute oneness with the chosen ideal. The gopis became Krishna. Mother became Ramakrishna. It was very interesting. And so we see how this intense period of grief, she turned into spiritual sadhana to experience her chosen ideal, Sri Ramakrishna. She returned to Kamapakur, and this period of her life causes us so much grief. She experienced intense poverty. Finally, Lakshmi, due to the village she experienced Lakshmi. Due to village gossip, she removed her bangles. And Sri Ramakrishna again appeared and said, don't remove your bangles. Don't you know the Vaishnava Tantra? And in the Vaishnava Tantra, it is written that the husband is Chinmoy, pure consciousness, ever present, and the wife is the goddess Lakshmi. So Sri Ramakrishna was bestowing on her the aspect of Lakshmi. She was the mother of all. Sri Ramakrishna said, I have left you so many of them, all jewels, all children. In the course of time, you will hear many, many people addressing you as mother. She was Radha, she was Lakshmi, she was the mother of all. At Balaram's house, she plunged into deep samadhi. And she said, I found that I had traveled to a faraway country. People there showed me warm tenderness. I looked exceedingly beautiful. The Master was there. Gently they made me sit by his side. I cannot express in words the joy I felt at that time. I like to think that that faraway country is America. And you have placed Mother by Sri Ramakrishna's side, and you have offered such beautiful worship. I was reluctant to re-enter my body, she said. She experienced Nirvikalpa Samadhi at Nilambar Babu's house at Belur. Regaining partial consciousness, she said, where are my hands? Where are my feet? Yogin Ma pressed her limbs and said, here are your hands and here are your feet. And so from these vignettes, we begin to see the vastness of Mother. When we pray to her, she answers our prayers. There's a special power that comes when we pray to Mother. Swami Swahananda said, you pray to Ramakrishna for knowledge and devotion. Mother, you can pray for anything. So by now her divinity was fully awakened. Her speech and demeanor had changed. She was the embodiment of motherly love and compassion, forbearance and patience. And she became ecstatic whenever she spoke of Sri Ramakrishna. Once Swami Abhedananda came to Sarada Devi to recite the hymn Prakriting, which you all sang. He wrote it for her, Swami Abhedananda. And when he recited Ramakrishna Gata Pranam, whose soul is absorbed in Ramakrishna, Sarada Devi's whole body became motionless. And when he recited Tanama Shravana Priyam, who loves to hear the Master's name, tears rolled from her eyes. And when he sang Tadbhava Ranjita Karam, whose mental state is saturated with the Master, Swami Abhedananda saw Sarada Devi no longer seated there. The Master was seated in place of the Mother. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate Om Shanti Shanti